UFC 294 is just around the corner, and with it, we'll finally get to see the highly anticipated rematch between the reigning lightweight champion Islam Makhachev, who's set to defend his title against Charles Oliveira. After coming off an impressive decision victory over Alexander Volkanovski back in July, Makhachev is looking to secure the second defense of his lightweight strap in what will be a thrilling matchup on October 21. Oliveira, on the other hand, will be out to seek revenge after his poor showing at UFC 280, which led to the loss of his title to Makhachev almost a year ago. We saw Oliveira bounce back with a quick finish over Beneil Dariush at UFC 289, and if the best version of the Brazilian appears at UFC 294, will be in for a war and what some have considered the greatest ever lightweight matchup. Join us in this video as we break down the fight between two of the best lightweights to ever compete in the UFC. Don't forget to stick around till the end to get our official prediction on just who walks away with the victory if these two face off inside the UFC's octagon. Dana White broke the news that Makhachev would be returning to headline the Dubai card alongside Oliveira back in July, much to the joy of MMA fans around the world. Following his loss at UFC 280, Oliveira was offered a rematch against the Dagestani champion. However, he declined and decided to take some time off to work on his mental well-being. Now that the fight has been announced and both fighters are well into their training camps, it is but a few short weeks away of one of the most exciting matchups of the year. But before we dive into the strengths and weaknesses of each fighter, let's first discuss how they end up exactly where they are today in the world of MMA. Charles Oliveira is one of the greatest lightweight champions of the modern era. However, his story doesn't always seem destined for greatness. The Brazilian grew up in a rough neighbourhood in the town of Guarará, Sao Paulo. At a young age, he was diagnosed with a heart murmur, rheumatic fever, and was told by doctors he could never play sports. However, his parents went against the decision and decided to let him partake in football and other sports, and eventually the condition healed himself. This led him to join a BJJ gym at 12 years old when he heard that coach Roger Coelho allowed anyone from a low-income family to train for free. Little did he know then that he would be inducting one of the UFC's greatest champions into mixed martial arts. Oliveira won multiple championship titles in BJJ and eventually decided to transition over to MMA in 2007. He quickly amassed an amateur record of 12 wins and 0 losses on the Brazilian circuit before making his professional debut on the promotion Predator fight. Oliveira continues to impress during his early professional career and was even named the third best Brazilian prospect by Sherdog in 2010, which ultimately played a small role in his signing by the UFC in the same year. The Brazilian started off his UFC career with 2 wins before going 2 for 4 in his next 7 fights, a long and no contest. From 2014 to 2017, we would see sparks of greatness Oliveira contained, yet on other occasions, he would seem to give up just as the fight got interesting. But in 2018, something changed for the Brazilian. Oliveira faced off against Clay Guida at UFC 225 and finished him off by way of rear naked choke. He went on to finish his next 6 opponents by either TKO or submission, which brought him to a showdown with Ferguson in what was essentially a #1 contenders fight. He earned the victory by way of unanimous decision and then went on to defeat Michael Chandler at UFC 262 for the vacant lightweight title. And after another impressive performance, he would finish the former Bellator champion just 20 seconds into round 2. The Brazilian followed this up by finishing both Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, which took his win streak to 11 fights. However, at UFC 280, he would lose his title to Islam Makhachev in a fight that many agree Oliveira just didn't show up. After a year off, he returned to face Beneil Dariush, whom he brutally finished in the first round of their fight of UFC 289, ultimately paving the way for the highly anticipated rematch with Makhachev at UFC 294. Islam Makhachev has a background story similar to most Dagestani and Russian fighters. Growing up in a small town and getting into wrestling at a young age, when he turned 15, Islam began training in Sambo under the guidance of Khabib Nurmagomedov's father, Abdulmanap. He went on to win gold at the 2016 Sambo Championships. Islam went on to have a victorious career in Sambo, becoming a 4-time Russian national champion, eventually after being influenced by Khabib and his father. The young martial artist decided to transition over to MMA, where he made his debut for the Russian promotion M1 Global in 2011. He earned an impressive win over Tengiz Couture by finishing his opponent in the first round by knockout. knockout. Islam went on to fight 3 more times for the Russian promotion, winning each of the bouts comfortably. Following a successful start to his UFC pro career on the Russian scene, Makhachev was offered a 4-fight contract with the UFC in 2014 and made his debut half a year later at UFC 187 in May 2015. He finished Leo Junts by way of rear naked choke. However, the success wouldn't last long. Makhachev would be brutally finished in his next fight against Adriano Martins at UFC 192. After the first loss of his professional career, the Dagestani bounced back and went on a 10-fight win streak, defeating opponents such as Drew Dober, Dan Hooker and Bobby Green, earning himself a shot at Charles Oliveira's title. The pair faced off at UFC's 280 in what many assume would be a 5-round war. However, Makhachev finished Oliveira in the second round by way of submission. Following this, Makhachev welcomed the challenge of the UFC's featherweight champion, Alexander Volkanovski, who decided to move up in an attempt to become a champ. The pair faced off at UFC 284 in what some have suggested was one of the most technical fights ever witnessed. In the end, Makhachev scored a narrow unanimous decision victory. Now, this brings us to UFC 294, where we'll see the Dagestani take on Charles Oliveira in a highly anticipated rematch. Now that we have the backstories of both men, let's break down their strengths and weaknesses, starting with Oliveira. Strength number 1, striking. Charles Oliveira has grown to become one of the lightweight division's most feared strikers. Oliveira is extremely versatile in this department and punishes his opponents with each shot. He also has some serious power in his hands, which we've seen on 9 occasions throughout his career, earning TKO victories over fighters such as Michael Chandler and Jared Gordon. Oliveira certainly has the skills required to finish Makhachev if he can land a few devastating blows. If the Brazilian brings back his usual striking proficiency by attacking with uppercuts, knees and elbows down the centre line, he could use such attacks to respond to Makhachev's takedown attempts with severe consequences for the Dagestani. Strength number 2, submissions. While Oliveira didn't bring forth any offensive grappling in his last fight against Makhachev, that doesn't change the fact that he's still widely considered the most dangerous submission fighter in UFC history as far as the stats are concerned. If Oliveira applies the pressure on the feet that we've seen before and manages to catch Makhachev, there's a good chance the Brazilian ends up in a dominant ground position. Just because Makhachev has never been tapped doesn't mean it's impossible. And if there's anyone in the lightweight division who could choke out the Dagestani, it's undoubtedly Oliveira. With that being said, let's move on to Charles Oliveira's most apparent weakness. He takes too much damage. Oliveira is known for being a fighter who can take a few blows to the face. More often than not, when he's knocked down, he's unfazed and is extremely dangerous off his back. However, this failed in the first fight against Makhachev and he ended up getting submitted. Oliveira will need to be wary with his offensive from the back against Makhachev, and this time round, we believe he'll try to avoid such a scenario. Or else the showdown at UFC 294 could very well mirror that which went down a year ago. With that being said about Charles Oliveira, let's dive into the strengths and weaknesses of Islam Makhachev. Strength number 1, wrestling. Islam Makhachev has an excellent grappling game, which stems from his years of training as a Sambo student. The Dagestani is one of the best wrestlers in MMA, and some have gone as far as to say he's even better than Khabib. Islam's takedown abilities are unmatched in the division, and we'll often see him shoot from as far as 5 feet away, snatch his opponent up, and take him to the ground. His strength is a big part of his ability to do so, and once he's latched onto an opponent, we very rarely see them break free. When Islam takes an opponent down, his ground control allows him to effortlessly dominate and tire out opponents and patiently wait until they give up their backs. Once the hooks are in, there's no escaping the Dagestani, and if he is able to get Oliveira to the ground, he has all the abilities to work towards a submission finish. Strength number 2, underrated striking. When we compare the striking of Makhachev's to Oliveira, many would assume the Brazilian is leaps and bounds ahead. However, Makhachev has grown to become a well-respected striker in his own right. Islam fights in a southpaw stance, allowing him to utilise his best weapon, his left leg. He's able to throw strong kicks from a relaxed position, which means they arrive quickly, making it difficult for his opponents to read. On top of this, his boxing is often considered to be better than his mentor, Khabib. We shouldn't forget that it was his punch that dropped Oliveira in their first fight, allowing the Dagestani to capitalise and finish the Brazilian by way of a submission. With that being said, let's discuss Makhachev's one weakness: submission defense against heel hooks. While this may seem odd, considering Makhachev is one of the best grapplers in the UFC right now, it stems back to his Sambo days. In this particular Russian martial art, heel hooks are banned in competition and were seldom practiced until recently. So if someone like Oliveria, an experienced BJJ practitioner, could latch onto the heel of Islam, we could see a submission attempt by the Brazilian, which would likely leave the Dagestani in a very dangerous position. So now that we have broken down both fighters' strengths and weaknesses, it's time for our official prediction. But before we do that, we hold a monthly shout out on our channel, and all you need to do to enter is comment "I subbed" in the comment section below. So make sure to comment and you'll be in with a chance of winning. This month's shout out goes to Here to Help People 729. Thanks for following along with our uploads and leaving behind comments. We're thrilled to have you on board as a fan and appreciate your constant support of our videos. If Makhachev is successful in taking Oliveira down, he has a clear path to victory. However, if Oliveira can implement knees and uppercuts during the attempt, we may see the Brazilian ruin Islam's game plan, and what we'll be left with is an exciting fight that could go the distance. While it will likely be a highly technical fight, if both performers show up in their best form, we will have to go with Oliveira in this one. He has much better striking and won't be afraid to enter into the pocket with Islam. Once Charles gets out of the first round, we believe his confidence will only grow, and as he begins to find his distance, we think he'll slowly work Islam down with technical shots. As he does, it's likely the Dagestani will shoot in for a takedown and get caught by an uppercut or knee that brings him to the ground. By the fourth round, we believe Oliveira will be able to capitalise on such a mistake from Islam and finish the Dagestani by way of rear naked choke.